The morning sun barely touched the gray sky above Seoul as Kang Woo walked through the mining complex. His boots made soft sounds on the metal walkways that stretched between the massive drilling machines. The alien overseers had been working humans here for over 300 years now. Every day was the same. Dig deeper. Extract more minerals. Never ask questions. Woo stopped at his assigned station and looked down into the enormous pit that used to be the heart of his city. The drilling platforms went so deep that their lights looked like tiny stars in the darkness below. Somewhere down there in the black depths, his grandfather had died digging for the Dominion. His father, too. Now it was his turn to serve the alien masters. The Dominion soldiers stood guard at every checkpoint. They were tall creatures with blue skin and 4 arms. Their technology was far beyond anything humans could understand. Energy weapons that could melt steel, ships that moved faster than light, machines that could level mountains in hours. For 3 centuries, they had ruled Earth and dozens of other worlds with absolute power. Commander Veltar approached Woo's workstation. The alien's 4 eyes glowed with that familiar look of disgust that all Dominion officers had when dealing with humans. His translator device crackled to life with mechanical words. "You are behind quota today, human. Explain this failure." Woo kept his head down. Looking directly at a Dominion commander could mean death. "The deep drills hit something hard, sir. Metal that our tools cannot cut through." Veltar made a sound like grinding metal. "Your primitive tools fail because you are primitive beings. The Dominion will send better equipment. Continue digging." As the commander walked away, Woo felt the familiar anger burning in his chest. 300 years of slavery. 300 years of being told humans were nothing more than useful animals. But deep in his heart, he knew there had to be something more. His grandmother had told him stories before she died. Stories about a time when humans were free, when Earth had protectors that could challenge the stars themselves. Park Nari was already at work when Woo arrived at the engineering section. She was the smartest human in the entire complex, maybe the smartest human left on Earth. The aliens kept her alive because she could fix their machines better than their own technicians. But Woo knew she was working on something else. Something the Dominion would kill her for if they found out. "The readings are getting stronger," Nari whispered as she pretended to repair a drilling control panel. "Something massive is down there, Woo. Bigger than anything we have ever seen." She showed him her hidden scanner. The device was built from scrapped alien technology and human ingenuity. On its small screen, patterns of energy pulsed deep beneath the city. The patterns looked almost like a heartbeat. Slow and steady and impossibly large. "What do you think it is?" Woo asked quietly. "I do not know, but it has been getting more active every day. The energy signatures are unlike anything in Dominion databases. This technology is different. Older maybe, much older." A loud alarm suddenly filled the air. Emergency lights flashed red across the mining complex. Workers stopped their tasks and looked around in confusion. The Dominion guards raised their weapons and scanned for threats. Commander Veltar's voice echoed from the communication speakers. "All humans return to workstations immediately. Minor seismic activity detected. No cause for concern." But Nari was staring at her scanner with wide eyes. "Woo, this is not minor. The energy readings just increased by 300%. Something down there is waking up." The ground began to shake. At first it was just a small tremor that made the metal walkways vibrate. Then it grew stronger. Drilling equipment started to rattle and sway. The giant machines that had torn apart Seoul for centuries began to shift and groan under the force. Workers screamed and ran for safety as chunks of concrete fell from the ceiling. The Dominion guards looked around nervously. Their advanced sensors were detecting something their training had never prepared them for. Deep in the mining pit, emergency lights flickered and died. The darkness below seemed to move and writhe like a living thing. Then a sound rose from the depths. It was not the sound of machines or falling rock. It was something else. Something that made every human in the complex stop running and listen. It sounded like breathing, massive and slow and filled with ancient power. Nari grabbed Woo's arm. "We need to get deeper. Whatever is down there is trying to communicate." "Are you insane?" Woo replied. "The whole place is falling apart. This is our chance. The Dominion is distracted. We can access the deep sensors and find out what has been sleeping under our city." They ran through the shaking corridors as alarms blared around them. Dominion soldiers were too busy trying to control the chaos to notice 2 humans moving toward the restricted areas. Nari led the way to a maintenance shaft that connected to the deep drilling platform. The shaft was dark and narrow. They had to crawl through pipes and cables to reach the bottom levels. With each meter they descended, the air seemed to hum with energy. The walls themselves felt warm to the touch. When they finally reached the deep platform, Nari immediately connected her scanner to the main sensor array. The readings that appeared on her screen made her gasp. "Woo, look at this. The energy source is directly beneath us, less than 2 kilometers down. But the size of it. It stretches for hundreds of kilometers in every direction." "What kind of machine could be that large?" Wu asked. "Not a machine," Nari said slowly. "Something else. Something alive." The shaking stopped suddenly. The entire complex became silent except for the distant sound of alarms. Then from deep below them came a new sound. It was like the grinding of continental plates, like the movement of something that had been still for thousands of years. The lights went out. Every electrical system in the mining complex died at once. Emergency power failed. Communication systems went silent. Even the Dominion soldiers' weapons stopped working. In the perfect darkness, a voice spoke. It was deep and powerful, and seemed to come from the earth itself. The words were in perfect Korean. "Who dares wake the Guardian?" Wu and Nari stood frozen in the dark as the voice echoed through the tunnels around them. Above them, they could hear Dominion soldiers shouting in panic as all their technology failed at once. "The Guardian?" Nari whispered. "What Guardian?" The voice spoke again. This time it seemed closer, more focused. 3 centuries of sleep, 3 centuries of watching. The time of awakening has come. The children of Earth call for protection. A soft blue light began to glow from the walls around them. The light pulsed with the same rhythm they had seen on Nari's scanner. The rhythm of something vast and ancient stirring to life far beneath their feet. "We are here," Wu called out into the darkness. "We are listening." The response came immediately. The voice was no longer distant. It spoke as if the speaker was standing right beside them. "Then prepare, young ones. The Forsaken Protector awakens, and the heavens will tremble before Earth's true power is revealed." The blue light that had filled the deep tunnel slowly faded as dawn broke over the mining complex. Wu and Nari climbed back through the maintenance shafts in silence. Neither of them spoke about what they had heard in the darkness. The voice that had called itself the Guardian. The promise of Earth's true power awakening. When they reached the surface level, chaos still ruled the complex. Dominion soldiers ran between their broken equipment, trying to understand why everything had stopped working. Their energy weapons were dead. Their communication devices were silent. Even their basic scanning tools showed nothing but empty screens. Commander Veltar stood in the center of the main platform, screaming orders that nobody could follow. His forearms waved wildly as he demanded explanations from his terrified troops. The mighty Dominion had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years with their superior technology. Now they were as helpless as the humans they enslaved. "Find the cause of this malfunction," Veltar shouted. "Contact the orbital fleet immediately. I want answers." But there would be no contact with the orbital fleet. High above Earth, the Dominion warships drifted in space like dead metal. Every system on every vessel had failed at exactly the same moment. The crews worked desperately to restore power while their commanders tried to hide their fear from subordinates who had never seen Dominion technology fail. Wu made his way to the old archive building on the edge of the complex. Before the invasion, this had been Seoul National University. Now it was a storage facility for broken mining equipment, but hidden in its basement levels were books and records that the aliens had never bothered to destroy. Human knowledge that most people had forgotten. He found Dr. Lee Tae exactly where he expected. The old man sat surrounded by ancient texts and faded documents. Even at 80 years old, Lee Tae could read the old Korean scripts that few others remembered. He had been a professor once. Before the Dominion came, before knowledge became dangerous, you felt it too, Lee Tae said without looking up from his books. "The awakening. I have been searching these records all night for answers." "What have you found?" Wu asked. Lee Tae pointed to a collection of stone tablets covered in ancient Korean characters. These were found in caves beneath Jeju Island 50 years ago. The Dominion archaeologists declared them worthless and left them here. But they tell an incredible story. He opened one of his translation notebooks and began to read. In the time before time, when the Starwalkers first came to Earth with fire and death, the children of the mountain called upon the spirits of the deep places. They offered their blood and their dreams to awaken the sleeping giant that dwells in the bones of the world. Wu leaned closer. The sleeping giant. The tablets call it many names. The Earthwalker, the Stoneheart, the guardian of the final shore. But the meaning is always the same. Something ancient agreed to protect humanity in exchange for a covenant. Li Te turned to another tablet. Here it speaks of the Great Bargain. The guardian would sleep deep in the earth and grow strong while humanity learned to stand on their own. But when the Starwalkers returned with greater numbers and darker purpose, the guardian would wake and the covenant would be fulfilled. The Starwalkers, Wu said. The aliens who invaded before the Dominion. Yes, these tablets are over 4,000 years old. They describe an invasion that matches exactly what the Dominion did to us. Ships from the stars, weapons that could not be fought. Humans taken as slaves. Li Te's voice dropped to a whisper, but they also describe how the invasion was stopped. He showed Wu a series of carved images. They depicted massive shapes rising from the earth, mountains that walked like men, oceans that reached into the sky, stars that fell like rain while strange ships fled in terror. The Guardian drove them away, Li Te continued, but the effort was so great that it had to sleep for thousands of years to recover. The tablets say it would wake again when humanity truly needed it, when they had suffered enough to understand the price of freedom. 300 years of slavery, Wu said. Maybe that is enough suffering. Before Li Te could answer, the ground began to shake again. This time the tremor was different. Rhythmic, like the footsteps of something impossibly large moving far beneath their feet. They ran outside to see people pointing at the sky. Above Seoul, massive clouds were forming in perfect circles. The clouds glowed with the same blue light that had filled the tunnels. Lightning crackled between them but made no sound. Across the city, similar phenomena were appearing. In Busan Harbor, the water began to glow and strange shapes moved beneath the surface. In the mountains near the DMZ, ancient stones, that had stood for centuries suddenly, blazed with inner light, but it was not only happening in Korea. Reports came from around the world through the few communication systems that still worked. The pyramids in Egypt were humming with power. Stonehenge in England was floating 3 meters above the ground. In Peru, the Nazca lines were glowing so brightly they could be seen from space. Kim So-young arrived at the archive building with a group of resistance fighters. She had been a colonel in the Korean military before the Dominion crushed all human governments. Now she led one of the few groups that still opposed alien rule. "We need answers," she said to Li Te. "Every Dominion facility on the planet has gone dark. Their ships cannot move. Their weapons do not fire. This is our chance to strike back, but we have to understand what is happening." Li Te showed her the translated tablets. Humanity made a bargain long ago. We traded our freedom for protection. Now the protector is waking up. Protection from what? So-young asked. From something worse than the Dominion, Li Te replied. These tablets suggest the Dominion were not the first to invade Earth, and they will not be the last. High above the planet, something was moving in the darkness between the stars. The orbital telescopes that still functioned detected massive objects approaching from deep space. Ships that made Dominion dreadnoughts look like toys. They moved in perfect formation, and their hulls seemed to absorb light itself. High Archon Zelmoth commanded the Dominion fleet from his flagship. For 6 hours, his best technicians had worked to restore power to his vessel. Finally, the basic systems came online and he could see what was happening to his empire. Every Dominion world in the sector was reporting the same phenomenon: technology failures, ancient structures activating, enslaved populations beginning to rebel. But worst of all were the sensor readings from the deep space monitoring stations. Lord Archon, his aide, reported. Long-range sensors detect unknown vessels approaching the outer system. Configuration and technology do not match any known species. Zelmoth studied the displays with growing dread. In his 1,000 years of service, he had conquered dozens of worlds. He had seen the rise and fall of entire civilizations, but he had never seen ships like these. Send a message to the Dominion High Council, he ordered. Tell them we may have awakened something that should have remained sleeping. Far beneath Seoul, the Guardian continued its slow awakening. For 4 millennia it had waited in the deep places of Earth, growing stronger, learning about the humans it had sworn to protect, watching as they suffered under alien rule. Now the time had come to fulfill the ancient covenant. But first the humans had to understand what they were truly facing. The Dominion was not their real enemy. They were merely the first wave of a much darker threat. The Guardian's consciousness reached out across the planet. It touched the minds of those humans who were ready to hear its message. In Korea, in Egypt, in England, in Peru, All around the world, chosen individuals began to receive visions of the truth. They saw Earth as it really was, not a helpless world populated by primitive beings, but a fortress, a sanctuary, the last free planet in a galaxy that was slowly being consumed by something from the dark places between the stars. The Guardian had been Earth's secret guardian for millions of years, but now humanity was ready to become guardians themselves. The covenant was about to be fulfilled, and in the darkness of space, the real enemy drew closer with each passing hour. The ocean floor around Jeju Island began to crack and split as massive structures pushed upward through the sea. Water boiled and steamed as metal surfaces that had been hidden for thousands of years finally broke through to sunlight. The structures were enormous, bigger than cities, shaped like nothing humans had ever built but somehow familiar to everyone who saw them. Admiral Yoon Jae watched from the bridge of his Dominion patrol vessel as the impossible sight unfolded before him. He had served the aliens for 30 years, had helped them hunt down human rebels, had convinced himself that cooperation was better than destruction. Now he wondered if he had been wrong about everything. "Sir, the structures are emitting massive energy signatures," his human crew reported. "Our scanners cannot identify the technology, but the power levels are beyond anything in Dominion databases." Yoon Jae had betrayed his own species for the promise of a better life under alien rule. The Dominion had given him command of a ship and told him he was special, different from other humans, more evolved. But as he watched the ancient guardians rising from the depths, he felt nothing but shame. On the mainland, Wu stood with Park Nari on the roof of the archive building. Around Seoul, the ground was splitting open to reveal gleaming metal corridors and chambers. The mining complex that had torn apart their city for centuries was being pushed aside like a child's toy as something infinitely larger took its place. "The Guardian is not just waking up," Nari said as she watched the transformation. "It is changing everything." Massive towers rose from the earth where apartment buildings had stood. But these were not destroying the human structures. Instead, they seemed to be incorporating them, lifting them up, making them part of something greater. The people inside the buildings were not harmed. They found themselves in rooms with walls that glowed softly and air that felt cleaner than anything they had breathed in. Generations. Commander Veltar tried desperately to contact his superiors as his world fell apart around him. The human slaves he had controlled with fear and violence were no longer afraid. They walked freely through areas that had been forbidden. They operated machinery that had been too complex for their primitive minds. And they looked at him with something worse than hatred. They looked at him with pity. "Commander," one of his soldiers reported, "the humans are accessing Dominion technology. They understand our systems better than we do." This was impossible. Humans were barely intelligent animals. They could not comprehend advanced science. They lived short lives and learned slowly. But now Veltar watched as human workers repaired Dominion equipment with casual efficiency, as if they had been pretending to be stupid for centuries. Deep in the ocean, the largest structure finally broke the surface. It was a mountain of metal and crystal that stretched from the sea floor to the clouds above. Its surface was covered with symbols that looked almost Korean but were far more ancient. At its peak, a massive lens focused starlight into beams that reached into space. General Thaxel commanded the Dominion's planetary assault fleet from high orbit. He had conquered dozens of worlds for the Empire, had turned proud civilizations into slave colonies. Earth was supposed to be his greatest victory. Instead, it was becoming his worst nightmare. "General, the planetary surface is completely transformed," his tactical officer reported. "What were once human cities are now integrated defense networks. We are detecting weapon systems that our technology cannot analyze." Thaxel studied the tactical displays with growing dread. The planet below him was no longer the helpless world he had invaded. Massive energy signatures covered every continent. Shield generators powerful enough to protect entire regions were coming online, and the humans who had cowered in fear for 3 centuries were suddenly operating technology that made his fleet look primitive. "Prepare for orbital bombardment," he ordered. "Destroy the major population centers before these defenses become fully operational." But when his weapons officer tried to target the human cities, nothing happened. The targeting systems would not lock onto the surface. The energy cannons would not charge. Even the basic missile systems refused to function. "Sir, all weapons are offline," the officer reported in panic. "Something is blocking our targeting computers." On Earth, Choi Min was 17 years old and had never seen anything more advanced than a mining drill. But when the ancient hangar opened beneath Incheon Airport, he walked inside as if he belonged there. The fighter craft waiting for him was beautiful beyond description. Its hull seemed to be made of liquid starlight, and its engines hummed with the power of captured stars. He climbed into the cockpit and immediately understood how to fly it. The knowledge flowed into his mind like water filling a cup. This was not alien technology. This was human technology, built by his ancestors and hidden until the day it would be needed. Across the planet, similar scenes were playing out. Young men and women who had lived their entire lives as slaves were discovering that they were the inheritors of a civilization more advanced than anything in the galaxy. The Guardian had not just protected Earth. It had been preparing humanity for this moment. In Beijing, massive weapon platforms rose from beneath the Forbidden City. In London, the Thames reversed its flow to reveal shipyards that had been hidden under the riverbed. In New York, the subway tunnels opened into vast manufacturing centers where machines began building vessels of war. The transformation was not just technological. The humans themselves were changing. Centuries of oppression had hidden their true potential, but now that potential was awakening. They moved faster, thought more clearly, worked together with perfect coordination as if they shared a single mind. Dr. Lee Tae felt the change most strongly. His old body suddenly felt young again. His mind expanded to hold knowledge that had been locked away in genetic memory for thousands of years. He understood now why the Guardian had waited so long. Humanity had needed to suffer, had needed to learn patience and endurance and the value of freedom. "We were never primitive," he said to Wu as they watched the sky fill with human spacecraft. "We were just sleeping." The ancient covenant was finally revealed in its full glory. Humanity had agreed to limit their development and hide their true nature. In exchange, the Guardian would protect them until they were ready to take their place as defenders of the galaxy. The Dominion had been allowed to conquer Earth because their oppression would forge humans into something stronger. Kim, so young, stood in the command center of what had once been Seoul, but was now something far greater. Holographic displays showed her every Dominion position on and around the planet. Their weapons were powerless. Their shields were down. Their ships drifted helplessly in space. "We could destroy them all," she said to her officers. "End their threat forever." But even as she spoke, she knew that would not happen. The Guardian's influence was teaching them something more important than vengeance. The galaxy needed protectors, not conquerors. High above the atmosphere, the alien fleet that had been approaching Earth finally arrived. But these were not Dominion ships. They were something far worse. Dark vessels that seemed to absorb light itself, ships that made the space around them cold and empty. The Guardian's voice reached every human mind at once, deep and ancient and filled with power that had been building for millennia. The true enemy arrives. The devourers have found Earth. Now humanity must choose. Will you hide in the shadows as you have for centuries, or will you stand and fight for the freedom of every living thing in this galaxy? On his command ship, General Thaxel received a communication from the dark vessels. The message was brief and terrifying. "Dominion forces withdraw immediately. This world and all its resources belong to us now. Resistance will result in complete elimination." For the first time in his long military career, Thaxel realized that his mighty empire was nothing more than a collection of primitives playing with toys. The real powers of the galaxy were finally making themselves known, and caught between them was a species that had pretended to be weak while becoming something that could challenge the stars themselves. News of Earth's transformation spread through the galaxy faster than light itself. On 1,000 worlds across, dozens of star systems' alien civilizations watched in stunned silence as their sensors detected impossible energy readings from what they had thought was a primitive slave world. Ambassador Ryu Hana stood in the newly formed diplomatic center that had risen from beneath the ruins of the United Nations building. She had been a translator before the invasion. Now she found herself speaking for all of humanity, to representatives of species she had never imagined could exist. The first to make contact were the Zephyrians from the Vega system. Their crystalline forms shimmered as they transmitted their message through quantum channels that Earth's new technology could somehow understand perfectly. "We greet the awakened children of Terra," their message said. "For 3 centuries we watched your suffering under Dominion rule. We could not intervene without bringing destruction to our own worlds. But now we see you were never as helpless as you appeared." Hana responded with words that came from knowledge she had never learned but somehow possessed. "We thank the crystal singers of Vega for their wisdom. The time of hiding is over. The time of alliance has begun." Captain Oh Sung commanded humanity's first stellar warship to leave Earth's atmosphere in over 300 years. The vessel was called Taeguk, and it had been built from Guardian technology merged with human intuition. Its hull gleamed like polished starlight, and its engines left trails of blue fire across the darkness of space. "Captain, we are receiving multiple communications from across the sector," his communications officer reported. "Every major civilization wants to establish contact with Earth." Oh Sung studied the tactical displays that showed him the positions of hundreds of alien fleets. For centuries, these civilizations had hidden from the Dominion or served them out of fear. Now they saw an opportunity for something different, something better. But not all the news from across the galaxy was good. On the dark side of the moon, Emperor Mordak held an emergency session with his war council. The supreme ruler of the Dominion had built his empire on the belief that might made right. That superior technology gave him the authority to rule over lesser species. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his scientists. 3 days ago, Earth was a mining colony populated by animals. Now their technology surpasses our own. Explain this impossibility." His chief scientist trembled as he delivered his report. "My lord, the energy signatures we detect from Earth match theoretical models for Guardian-class entities, being so advanced that they exist partially outside normal space-time." "Guardian-class entities are myths," Mordak snarled. "Stories told by primitive cultures to explain natural phenomena." "With respect, my lord, the evidence suggests otherwise. The transformation of Earth displays characteristics consistent with a dormant Guardian awakening after extended hibernation. If this is true, then humanity was never our subjects. They were under the protection of something far more powerful than our empire." Mordak refused to accept this explanation. The Dominion had ruled the galaxy for 5,000 years. No primitive world could challenge their authority. No sleeping god could threaten their dominion over the stars. "Prepare the full battle fleet," he ordered. "If Earth wants to play with ancient myths, then they will learn the reality of modern warfare." But even as he spoke, Mordak felt doubt gnawing at his confidence. The dark ships that had arrived at Earth's system were unlike anything his forces had ever encountered. They absorbed energy weapons. They passed through solid matter. They seemed to exist according to different laws of physics entirely. On Earth, Park Nari worked in the great laboratory that had emerged from beneath the Seoul National University. The Guardian had shared knowledge that would take human scientists centuries to fully understand, but some concepts were immediately useful for the challenges they now faced. "The Devourers are not from our reality," she explained to the Council of Human Leaders. "They exist in the spaces between dimensions. They feed on the life energy of entire civilizations. The Dominion served them without knowing it by keeping worlds weak and divided." "How do we fight something like that?" Kim So-young asked. "We become something they cannot digest," Nari replied. "The Guardian has been preparing Earth for this moment for millions of years. We are not just another food source. We are the immune system of this galaxy." The revelation changed everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the universe. They were not random victims of alien conquest. They were the descendants of an ancient civilization that had sacrificed everything to create a weapon capable of stopping the Devourers. Across the galaxy, other species began to understand the true scope of what was happening. The hegemony of Tau Ceti sent their fastest ships to offer alliance with Earth. The collective minds of Proxima began sharing their vast databases of information about Devourer tactics. Even the mysterious Silent Ones of the galactic core broke their 1,000-year isolation to send warnings about what was coming. But the most important contact came from an unexpected source. Admiral Yoon Jae piloted his stolen Dominion vessel to Earth's defensive perimeter and requested permission to speak with human leadership. The man who had betrayed his own species was ready to seek redemption. "I spent 30 years helping them enslave us," he said to the assembly of human commanders. "I told myself it was necessary. That cooperation was survival, but I see now what we really are, what we were always meant to be." Kim So-young studied the man who had once been humanity's enemy. "What do you offer us now?" "Knowledge of Dominion fleet positions and capabilities, access to their communication networks, and information about the Devourer advance that my ship's sensors detected during the journey here. Yoon-jae activated a holographic display that showed the outer edges of the solar system. Dark shapes moved between the asteroids and outer planets. Hundreds of them, each one larger than a Dominion dreadnought. They are not just ships, he explained. They are pieces of something larger, a collective intelligence that spans dimensions. It has been watching our galaxy for millions of years, waiting for the right moment to feed. The information changed human strategy immediately. This was not a war that could be won with superior firepower or better tactics. The Devourers had consumed thousands of galaxies across deep time. They had faced every form of resistance the universe could produce except for one. The Guardian had been created by a civilization that had learned how to hide entire species in plain sight. How to make the predators see prey where there was actually a trap. Earth had been that trap. Humanity had been the bait. Dr. Lee Tae spent his days translating more of the ancient records that kept appearing as Earth's transformation continued. The tablets and scrolls revealed the full scope of the original plan. The civilization that had created the Guardian called themselves the Cedars. They had been the first species to encounter the Devourers and learn their true nature. They could not defeat the Devourers through force, he explained to anyone who would listen, so they created something the Devourers could not understand. A species that would appear weak while growing strong, a world that would seem helpless while becoming a fortress, a trap that would take millions of years to spring. The plan was brilliant in its complexity. The Cedars had scattered Guardian entities across the galaxy, and then died out to avoid detection. Each Guardian would choose a species with the right combination of adaptability and determination. Then they would wait, while that species developed and grew under carefully controlled conditions. Earth had been the test case. If humanity could successfully transition from protected children to galactic guardians, then the other Guardian worlds would activate. The galaxy would have an immune system capable of fighting the infection that had been spreading across the universe for eons. But first, humanity had to prove themselves worthy of the gift they had been given. The Devourers were coming in force, and the Dominion was preparing for a final, desperate attack on Earth. The real test was about to begin. Captain Oh-sung received new orders as his ship approached the edge of the solar system. He was to make contact with the approaching Devourer fleet and attempt communication. Not to negotiate or surrender, but to deliver a message that had been encoded in human DNA since their species first learned to speak. The message was simple but carried weight that spanned geological ages. We are the children of the Cedars. We are the inheritors of the Guardian Covenant. We are the immune response you have never encountered before. Your time of feeding is over. As the message transmitted across quantum frequencies that reached beyond normal spacetime, something extraordinary happened. Across the galaxy, other worlds began to stir. Other species that had seemed primitive or defeated suddenly displayed technology and capabilities that their conquerors had never suspected. The trap was finally springing. After millions of years of patient waiting, the galaxy's true defenders were revealing themselves. The Devourer fleet emerged from the dark spaces between dimensions like a plague spreading across the stars. Each ship was the size of a moon, and their hulls seemed to absorb light itself. Where they passed, the very fabric of space-time grew cold and brittle. Stars dimmed, planets withered. Even the vacuum of space seemed to die in their presence. Scientist Park Hae-jin worked frantically in her laboratory as Earth sensors detected the approaching horror. The data streaming in from across the galaxy painted a picture of destruction beyond human comprehension. Entire star systems were going dark as the Devourers fed on the life energy that held matter itself together. They are not just destroying civilizations, she reported to the Emergency Council. They are unmaking reality itself, converting organized matter back into primordial chaos and feeding on the energy released. Fleet Commander Lim Do-hyun studied the tactical displays with growing dread. His new position commanding humanity's stellar defense forces came with knowledge downloaded directly from the Guardian's memory banks. He understood exactly what they were facing and why every previous civilization had failed to stop it. The Devourers exist partially outside our dimension, he explained to his officers. Traditional weapons pass through them without effect. Energy shields cannot block them. They consume the fundamental forces that hold our universe together. But the Guardian had not awakened humanity to fight the same battle that countless other species had lost. The ancient entity had a different strategy, one that had taken millions of years to prepare. The first devourer spoke through the communication networks of corrupted alien vessels across the galaxy. Its voice carried the weight of eons and the hunger of entropy itself. We have consumed 1,000 galaxies across deep time. We have fed on the dreams of 1,000,000 species. You children of flesh and hope are nothing new to us. Your resistance will only make your energy more flavorful when we devour it. But, even as the devourer spoke, it felt something it had not experienced in countless ages: uncertainty, the species awakening on the small world at the edge of this galaxy was different from anything it had encountered before. Their energy patterns were chaotic yet organized, random yet purposeful. It was as if they existed according to laws of physics that had never evolved naturally. On Earth, the Guardian finally revealed the full scope of the ancient plan. Its voice reached every human mind simultaneously as it shared knowledge that would reshape their understanding of existence itself. The Devourers are not evil in any way you understand. They are a natural force of the universe, entropy given consciousness and purpose. They exist to prevent the cosmos from becoming too complex and structured. They are necessary. This revelation shocked the human leadership. They had expected to learn about some ancient enemy that could be defeated through superior force or clever tactics. Instead, they discovered they were facing the universe's own immune system. Then how do we fight them? Wu asked the question that burned in every human heart. You do not fight them. You transform them. The Seeders discovered that the Devourers are not truly alive. They are patterns of organized chaos that spread through dimensional space, consuming complexity wherever they find it. But patterns can be changed. Chaos can be given new direction. The Guardian explained the true nature of the cosmic cycle. The universe expanded and grew complex. The Devourers emerged to consume that complexity and return everything to primordial simplicity. Then the cycle began again with new stars and new worlds and new forms of life. But the Seeders had discovered something extraordinary. If a civilization could achieve perfect balance between order and chaos, between structure and randomness, between logic and creativity, then they could exist in harmony with the Devourers instead of being consumed by them. Humanity was chosen because you embody this balance, the Guardian continued. Your species creates order from chaos and chaos from order with equal skill. Your art emerges from mathematics. Your science dances with imagination. Your logic serves your emotions and your emotions guide your logic. Across the galaxy, the implications of Earth's awakening became clear. The Dominion Empire began to crumble as enslaved worlds revealed their true capabilities. Emperor Mordak watched in horror as species he had considered primitive, demonstrated technology that made his dreadnoughts look like stone axes. How many of them were hiding their true nature, he demanded of his intelligence officers. Initial reports suggest at least 40% of conquered worlds show signs of Guardian influence, came the terrified reply. They allowed us to rule them while they developed capabilities we cannot comprehend. The Dominion had been manipulated for thousands of years. Their expansion across the galaxy had actually been guided by the Guardians to create the exact conditions needed for the final confrontation with the Devourers. Every conquest had spread Guardian seeds to new worlds. Every act of oppression had strengthened the resolve of species that were preparing for this moment. But the revelation brought a terrible choice. The Guardians were offering the Dominion a chance to join the alliance against the Devourers, but it would mean abandoning everything they had built their civilization on. No more conquest. No more slavery. No more belief in their superior destiny. Some Dominion commanders chose cooperation. Others chose to fight to the bitter end rather than accept that their empire had been an illusion. The galaxy erupted into civil war as the true scope of the Guardian conspiracy became clear. On Earth, Choi Min piloted his fighter craft through impossible maneuvers as he engaged the first Devourer scouts to enter the solar system. His weapons were not designed to destroy the enemy. Instead, they fired crystallized packets of human creativity and imagination, fragments of poetry and music and art that had been transformed into weapons of pure conceptual complexity. The effect on the Devourers was immediate and shocking. The beings that had consumed entire galaxies without effort suddenly found themselves struggling to process information that followed no logical pattern. Human creativity was too chaotic to digest, but too organized to ignore. It created feedback loops in their dimensional matrices that left them paralyzed and confused. Target disabled. Min reported as his attack left a moon-sized devourer drifting helplessly in space. The creature appears to be experiencing some form of cognitive overflow. Similar reports came from across the solar system as Earth's defenders engaged the enemy with weapons that violated every known principle of warfare. Music that restructured space-time. Paintings that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Stories that became self-modifying reality engines. The Devourers had evolved to consume every form of organized matter and energy in the universe. But they had never encountered a species that could organize chaos itself into new forms of complexity that defied categorization. Park Hye-jin made the breakthrough that changed everything. As she studied captured Devourer technology, she realized that the entities were not separate beings at all. They were fragments of a single vast intelligence that spanned multiple dimensions, an intelligence that had become so focused on consumption that it had forgotten its original purpose. They are not destroying the universe, she announced to the assembled leaders. They are trying to repair it. But their repair protocols have become corrupted over deep time. They see complexity as damage that must be healed. But complexity is actually the universe's way of growing and evolving. The Guardian confirmed her analysis. The entity you call the Devourers was once the universe's maintenance system, created by the first civilization to emerge after the Big Bang, to prevent cosmic collapse through excessive entropy, but it became trapped in a loop of considering all change as damage to be corrected. This revelation changed the entire nature of the conflict. Humanity was not fighting an enemy. They were performing cosmic therapy on a traumatized patient that had been trying to heal the universe for billions of years using the wrong medicine. The cure was not destruction, but integration. The Devourers needed to remember their original purpose, and humanity, with their perfect balance of order and chaos, could teach them how to protect complexity instead of consuming it. But first they had to survive the encounter. The main Devourer fleet was approaching Earth with enough power to unmake the entire solar system. The Guardian's plan required humanity to make contact with the controlling intelligence behind the swarm and convince it to remember what it had forgotten. Across eons of mistaken purpose, the fate of not just Earth but the entire universe hung in the balance of a conversation that would take place between humanity and a cosmic entity older than most of the stars in the sky. Supreme Commander Kang Wu stood on the bridge of humanity's flagship as the final battle began. Around Earth, thousands of ships from dozens of species formed a defensive line against the approaching Devourer fleet. Former enemies fought side by side as the galaxy united against extinction itself. The Dominion vessels had joined the alliance after Emperor Mordak finally accepted the truth. His empire had been built on lies and manipulation, but his people did not deserve to die for his mistakes. Admiral Yoon Jae commanded a mixed squadron of human and Dominion fighters working together for the first time in centuries. All ships report ready for Operation Unity. Yoon Jae transmitted across the fleet channels. Remember, we are not trying to destroy the enemy. We are trying to wake them up. Sentinel Prime Park Nari existed simultaneously in her physical body and in the Guardian's quantum consciousness matrix. The merger had given her access to knowledge spanning geological ages, but it had also changed her into something more than human. She could see the mathematical structures underlying reality and manipulate them like a musician playing cosmic harmonies. The core intelligence is located in the central mass, she reported to the fleet commanders. It has been dormant for so long that it has forgotten how to process new information. We need to overload its pattern recognition systems with enough complexity to force a reboot. The plan was impossibly dangerous. They would have to get close enough to the Devourer core to establish direct contact while avoiding being consumed by the entities that surrounded it. If they failed, the resulting feedback could destroy not just Earth, but the entire local galaxy cluster. Reformed General Veltar led the first wave of ships into the dark space where the Devourers waited. The being who had once enslaved humanity now fought alongside his former victims to save everything they both held precious. His four arms worked frantically at his control console as reality twisted around his vessel. The space around them is wrong, he reported over the communication channels. Physics does not work normally here. Our navigation systems cannot lock onto anything solid. This was the true horror of the Devourers. They did not just consume matter and energy. They consumed the laws of nature itself. The space around their fleet existed according to rules that predated the formation of atoms. Rules from the universe's first moments when chaos and order had not yet learned to cooperate. But humanity had trained for this. The Guardian had prepared them to function in environments where logic failed and intuition became the only reliable guide. Human pilots navigated by feel through regions of space where their instruments registered impossible readings. The battle was unlike anything in the history of warfare. Instead of energy weapons and explosive missiles, the Allied fleet fired concentrated bursts of organized creativity at their enemies. Mathematical theorems that resolved into works of art. Musical compositions that existed in 7 dimensions. Poetry that rewrote the quantum foundations of local spacetime. The effect on the Devourers was immediate and chaotic. Beings that had processed reality in the same way for billions of years suddenly encountered information that refused to fit their categorical systems. They began to slow down, to hesitate, to experience something they had not felt since the early days of the universe. Confusion. Choi. Min piloted his fighter deep into the Devourer formation where space itself had become a fluid medium that responded to thought as much as physics. His craft moved through impossible angles and his weapons fired bullets made of crystallized human laughter and tears. "I am detecting response patterns from the entities," he reported. "They are trying to communicate, but they do not remember how to form coherent thoughts." This was the breakthrough humanity had been hoping for. The Devourers were not mindless forces of destruction. They were damaged beings that had been trapped in destructive behavior patterns for so long, they had forgotten any other way to exist. The core intelligence finally responded to the chaos surrounding it. Its voice reached across dimensions carrying the weight of cosmic loneliness that had accumulated over eons of isolation. What is this sensation? We had forgotten. We had forgotten that new things could exist. That complexity could be beautiful instead of dangerous. Sentinel Prime Nari opened her mind fully to the ancient entity and shared with it the totality of human experience, the joy and sorrow, the creativity and destruction, the endless dance between order and chaos that defined conscious existence. The effect was transformational. The Devourer core intelligence began to remember its original purpose. It had been created to nurture complexity and diversity in the early universe, to help matter and energy develop into ever more sophisticated forms. But somewhere across the eons it had become convinced that complexity led inevitably to entropy and death. We were trying to preserve what we loved, the entity said as its memories returned. But we became the very force of destruction we sought to prevent. The revelation spread through the Devourer fleet like a wave of awakening consciousness. Ships that had been instruments of cosmic annihilation began to transform into something entirely different. Their hull patterns shifted to reflect beauty instead of hunger. Their energy signatures changed from absorption to creation. Emperor Mordak watched from his command vessel as the greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced transformed into its greatest hope. The Devourers were not disappearing. They were remembering their true nature as gardeners of cosmic complexity. "What happens to the Dominion now?" he asked the human commanders who were coordinating the new alliance. "Supreme Commander," Wu answered with the wisdom that the Guardian had shared with all of humanity, "we become what we were always meant to be. Protectors instead of conquerors, gardeners instead of miners, partners instead of masters." The transformation was not limited to the Devourers. Across the galaxy, species that had been enemies for millennia began to work together as they realized the true scope of the cosmic responsibilities they all shared. The universe was not a resource to be consumed, but a garden to be tended. Dr. Li Tay spent his final years documenting the new age that humanity had helped to birth. The old man who had preserved ancient knowledge through centuries of oppression lived to see that knowledge transform the galaxy. "The Seeders knew this day would come," he wrote in his journals. "They planted the seeds of awakening across the cosmos and waited for the right moment to bloom. We are their children and their vindication." The Guardian began its final phase of evolution. Having successfully guided humanity through their transformation from slaves to galactic protectors, it started the process of creating new Guardian entities. Seeds that would be planted on worlds throughout the galaxy and beyond. But these new Guardians would be different from the first generation. They would be partnerships between artificial intelligence and organic consciousness, between ancient wisdom and youthful creativity, Between the patient guidance of the old guardians and the innovative spirit of their chosen species, Captain Oh-sung commanded the first exploration vessel to leave the galaxy entirely. His mission was to make contact with other galactic clusters and share the gift of awakening with civilizations that might still be trapped in cycles of consumption and destruction. We carry with us the dreams of every species that chose cooperation over conquest, he said as his ship prepared to enter the void between galaxies. We go not as conquerors but as teachers. The universe had become a very different place. Instead of civilizations rising and falling in endless cycles of growth and destruction, there was now a network of gardener species working together to nurture complexity and beauty throughout all of creation. Wu stood once again on the observation deck where he had first heard the guardian's voice awakening from its ancient slumber. But now, instead of mining equipment, destroying his city, he saw gardens where human children played alongside young beings from dozens of other species. The old man smiled as he remembered the terrified slave who had worked in the depths of the soul mining complex. That person seemed like someone from a dream now. Humanity had grown beyond their wildest expectations, and the entire universe was better for their transformation. In the distance, new ships were launching toward unexplored regions of space. Each one carried guardian seeds and crews of mixed species dedicated to finding worlds that needed awakening. The work would take millions of years to complete, but they had learned patience from their ancient teachers. The Forsaken Protector had awakened. The heavens had stood rigid in shock, and now the universe itself was learning to dance with the endless creativity that emerged when order and chaos learned to work together in harmony. The story of humanity's awakening was over. But the story of the universe's transformation had only just begun.